The Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport hummed with the steady rhythm of travel rolling suitcases, hurried footsteps, and the distant murmur of announcements over the intercom. Among the sea of passengers weaving through the bustling terminal, Ethan Vaughn moved with quiet purpose. He was neither rushing nor dawdling, yet there was something about him that felt out of sync, like a song just slightly offbeat. Dressed in a simple gray button-down, dark jeans, and well-worn leather boots, Ethan was deliberately unremarkable. His only notable possession was the weathered brown backpack slung over his shoulders, scuffed at the edges, its seams stretched with age. He blended in. At least that was the idea. Then the dog barked. A sharp, aggressive snarl shattered the white noise of the terminal. A German shepherd, muscles taut, yanked hard against its handler's leash, its deep growl sending nearby travelers skittering away. Ethan stopped mid-step, his breath catching in his throat. "Hold it. Stay right where you are." A uniformed security officer strode toward him, hand resting on his holstered firearm. The dog, identified by the name Shadow stitched onto its vest, was still snarling. Its dark eyes locked onto Ethan with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. Ethan raised his hands slowly, palms open. "What the hell is this about?" "Drop the bag," the officer ordered, voice steady but firm. Ethan hesitated. Not because he had anything to hide, at least. He didn't think he did. But because something about this moment felt wrong. He could see the tension in the officer's posture, the way Shadow was behaving, more than just a routine security check. "Sir," another officer joined in, his hand tightening around a radio clipped to his chest. "We need you to place your backpack on the ground. Now." Ethan's fingers instinctively curled around the strap. His heart pounded. What was in the bag? He had packed it himself that morning. His laptop, a change of clothes, his travel documents. Nothing else. So why was a security dog reacting as if he was carrying something far more dangerous? Slowly, he slid the bag off his shoulder and set it down. The officer motioned for a bomb technician who approached carefully, clad in heavy-duty gloves. Shadow continued to growl, shifting anxiously as the bag was unzipped. The moment the technician peeled back the top flap, his body went rigid. What the hell? A black, sleek device sat nestled between Ethan's belongings, wires wrapped neatly around its compact frame. A faint hum vibrated through the air, almost imperceptible, but enough to send a jolt of unease through the security team. Ethan stared at it, completely blank. "That's not mine. Step back. Hands behind your head," the officer barked. "I don't know what that is." Ethan protested, his pulse skyrocketing. "Sir, you need to come with us." Two officers seized his arms, pulling him away from the scene. Around them, the terminal fell into a hushed, watchful silence. Phones were raised. Cameras recorded. Ethan barely registered any of it. His mind raced, trying to piece together an explanation that didn't exist. Because there was one thing he knew for certain. That device had never been in his backpack. And yet, something deep in his subconscious screamed that he had seen it before. The sterile walls of the security holding room did nothing to ease the storm raging in Ethan's head. He sat rigid in a metal chair, wrists resting on his lap, his reflection fractured in the one-way mirror across from him. The door creaked open. A woman entered, tall, sharp-eyed, wearing an immaculate black suit. A government type, no doubt. She carried herself with the authority of someone who was not to be questioned. She set a file down on the table, flipping it open with slow, deliberate precision. Ethan caught a glimpse of the contents, his passport photo, a timeline of his movements, and a picture of the device that had been in his backpack. "Ethan Vaughn," she began, her voice unreadable. "You've been off the grid for nearly 5 years. No credit history. No registered residence. No employment records. And then, out of nowhere, you show up at a major international airport carrying this." She tapped the photograph of the device. Ethan exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "I told your officers, I have no idea where that thing came from." She leaned forward. "And yet, Mr. Vaughn, you looked at it like you recognized it." Ethan's jaw tightened. He couldn't argue with that. The moment he had laid eyes on it, something in the depths of his mind had shifted. A flicker of recognition. A ghost of a memory. The woman studied him. "Tell me, where have you been for the last 5 years?" Ethan opened his mouth. And nothing came out. His throat constricted. His thoughts tangled. Where had he been? He tried to summon an answer, but his mind hit a wall, an empty, yawning void, where 5 years of memory should have been. His breathing grew shallow. His fingers curled against the table. His voice came out hoarse, uncertain. "I don't know." The woman's expression didn't change, but he could tell she had expected that answer. That terrified him more than anything else. She slid a photograph across the table. It was a picture of him taken years ago. He looked younger, sharper. But what made his stomach drop was the corporate logo behind him. It was for Aegis Technologies, one of the most classified military defense contractors in the country. Ethan's heart pounded. He had never worked for Aegis. At least, he didn't remember working for them. The woman's voice cut through his spiraling thoughts. "You're going to want to start remembering, Mr. Vaughn." Because from the moment that device appeared in his bag, he was no longer just another traveler. He was a target. Ethan Vaughn stared at the photograph on the table, his pulse pounding against his ribs. The image was of him standing in front of the sleek corporate headquarters of Aegis Technologies. His younger self wore an expression of confidence, his posture straight, his eyes filled with purpose. But no matter how long he studied the photo, no matter how hard he tried to reach for the memory attached to it, there was nothing. A yawning void stretched across his mind where 5 years of his life should have been. He clenched his jaw, frustration tightening his muscles. "I don't remember," he admitted, his voice strained. The woman across from him, Agent Claire Sinclair, didn't flinch. Instead, she folded her hands over the folder on the table, her gaze steady. "Then let's help you remember." The door opened again, and another agent entered, carrying a tablet. Without a word, he placed it in front of Ethan and pressed play. Grainy security footage flickered to life on the screen, a busy airport terminal. A timestamp reading 2 hours before his arrest. Ethan watched himself walking through the concourse, blending in with the crowd. And then he saw her. A woman in dark sunglasses, a wide-brimmed hat, moving with calculated precision. She was following him. Ethan tensed as he watched her brush past him in the footage, her fingers slipping into the side pocket of his backpack in a motion so fluid that if you weren't looking for it, you'd never see it. "There," Agent Sinclair said, tapping the screen. "That's when she planted it." Ethan exhaled sharply. "Who is she?" Sinclair didn't answer. Instead, she swiped to another video. Different airport, different city, Chicago, O'Hare, a week ago. The same woman, different disguise. This time, she was slipping something into another man's bag. The next clip was Atlanta. Then Seattle. Each time, a lone traveler, unsuspecting, unaware. Each time the same maneuver. Ethan felt a prickle of something uneasy crawl up his spine. What the hell is this? Sinclair exhaled. That's what we're trying to find out. She leaned in, voice lowering. But here's the part that should concern you the most, Mr. Vaughn. Every single person she's planted a device on in the last month, they've all disappeared. The words sent a chill through him. He swallowed hard. So why am I still here? Sinclair tilted her head, studying him. That's the question, isn't it? Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. He needed to think, to make sense of this. He forced himself to focus on the facts. A device was planted in his bag. He had no memory of the last 5 years. A mysterious woman was targeting people like him, and those people were vanishing. The more he tried to piece it together, the more his head throbbed. He pressed his fingers against his temples. Think. And then it happened. A flicker of something, a flash of white, a room, sterile, blindingly bright. Rows of monitors displaying streams of data. The sound of a low, mechanical hum filling the air. His own voice, distant, as if underwater. "This isn't what we agreed to." Ethan sucked in a sharp breath as the vision slammed into him, fragmented, disjointed, but real. Sinclair noticed his reaction instantly. "What is it?" He shook his head, disoriented. I don't know. A memory, I think." He looked up at her, confusion flickering across his face. It was a lab. Or a control room. I don't know where, but it felt important. Sinclair exchanged a glance with her partner. "That's a start," she murmured. She tapped the file on the table. "We know you worked for Aegis Technologies. What we don't know is what you were working on. Classified projects, high-level clearance. Then one day, you just vanished. No resignation. No records. You disappeared completely until today." Ethan's fingers curled into fists. He hated the feeling of being a stranger to his own past. "If I worked on something important, wouldn't there be files? Reports?" "There were," Sinclair admitted. "But after you disappeared, Aegis scrubbed everything. No records, no project logs, nothing. Like you never existed." That did nothing to ease the unease in his gut. Ethan exhaled slowly. "I need to talk to someone who actually knew me." Sinclair considered this, then slid her phone across the table. "There's only one person who might have answers." Ethan looked at the screen. A single name and number. Dr. Claire Sinclair, former Aegis research lead. He blinked. "Wait, that's you." She nodded. "I didn't just work for the agency. I worked with you." Ethan's stomach twisted. "You remember me?" "I remember who you were 5 years ago," Sinclair said quietly. "And I know whatever made you disappear, you did it to yourself." The words knocked the air from his lungs. He shook his head in disbelief. "Why the hell would I do that?" Sinclair's gaze darkened. "Because we built something, Ethan. Something that could change the world. And you realized it was too dangerous to exist." Another pulse of pain shot through his skull. He clenched his teeth, gripping the edge of the table. More flashes. A research lab. A breakthrough. Data streams forming patterns no one had seen before. A heated argument. His own voice urgent. "We can't let them use it this way." Sinclair watched as he struggled. "You're remembering, aren't you?" Ethan forced his breathing to steady. "Not enough." Sinclair exhaled. "Then we need to trigger more." She stood and gestured toward the door. "Come with me." Ethan hesitated. "Where?" "To the last place you were before you vanished." Ethan Vaughn sat in the back of the unmarked black SUV as it sped down the highway, headlights slicing through the darkness. Claire Sinclair sat beside him, her fingers scrolling through a tablet, occasionally glancing up at him as if measuring his state of mind. His head still throbbed from the flood of fragmented memories, each one pressing against the walls of his consciousness, begging to be pieced together. The last place he had been before he disappeared. That was where they were going. The thought sent a cold shiver down his spine. The facility was buried deep in the Texas desert, a forgotten relic of Aegis Technology's most classified research. As they approached, Ethan's fingers curled into fists against his thighs. Something in him screamed to turn back, to run, but he forced himself to stay still. The SUV rolled to a stop at a seemingly abandoned warehouse, but as they stepped inside, the truth unraveled before him. Beneath the surface was an underground lab, untouched for years yet still pulsing with dormant power. The walls were lined with monitors, dark screens reflecting their silhouettes like ghosts. As soon as Ethan stepped inside, something in his mind clicked. He had been here before. He swallowed hard, breathing shallowly as memories surged back. Nights spent analyzing complex algorithms, discussions about ethical boundaries, the weight of something too powerful to control. Claire's voice broke through the haze. "This is where it happened. Where you made the choice." Ethan turned slowly. "What choice?" She exhaled. "To erase your own memory." The words hit him like a physical blow. He shook his head, stepping back. "No, that doesn't make sense." But even as he said it, he knew it was true. His technology had been capable of more than anyone realized. It could predict patterns not just in digital networks, but in human systems, financial markets, power grids, even social behavior. It was never meant to control, only to understand. But understanding something meant knowing how to manipulate it. And that was the problem. Ethan ran a hand over his face, his mind racing. "We built something too dangerous." Claire nodded. "And you knew the only way to protect it was to bury it inside yourself." Another flash of memory. A white room, standing before a console, entering the final command that would wipe his own mind. His stomach churned. "I chose to forget." "Yes." Claire's voice was steady. "But now they forced you to remember." Ethan's pulse pounded. He turned to face her. "Who's after it?" She hesitated. "Everyone." The words sent a chill through him. "Aegis? They never stopped looking for you." "The government?" "Some factions." "Not all. Other players?" A shadow crossed her expression. "Yes." Ethan exhaled slowly. The realization settled over him like a weight. "So what now?" Claire studied him. "That's up to you." The choice hung between them. He could run again, erase it all once more, disappear. Or he could face it. Control it before someone else did. Footsteps echoed from above. Claire stiffened, reaching for her sidearm. "They found us." Ethan's mind sharpened. No more running. His fingers danced over the old console, muscle memory guiding him. The system booted up, lines of code cascading down the screens. The technology was still intact. He had seconds. He glanced at Claire. "Do you trust me?" Without hesitation, "Yes." Then he made his choice. His fingers flew over the keyboard, inputting the final command, the last safeguard he had built 5 years ago. A failsafe. A final failsafe. Outside, the world was watching, waiting to claim his technology. Instead, he released it. A global transmission. Every research facility, every intelligence agency, every major tech corporation. The full blueprint. No one could own it now. No one could weaponize it alone. The doors burst open. Armed men flooded the room. But Ethan stood his ground, a faint smile playing at his lips. It was done. Some secrets weren't meant to be controlled, only understood.